My name is Olivia Hale, and this is not a sob story. This is a war journal, a record of everything they tried to bury, a living memory of every time they looked at me and saw nothing. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I wasn't even born with a welcome cry. My birth was a complication, a mistake. I heard it with my own ears when I was 7. We didn't even plan for Olivia, my mother whispered to a friend over the phone. It just happened. We were trying for a boy. I stood on the stairs, my hand gripping the banister, heart pounding like it wanted to escape. Even at 7, those words sank in like nails. Unplanned, unwanted, unspoken. From that day forward, I began to see everything differently. The cold tone in my mother's voice, the quick glances my father threw at me during dinner never quite meeting my eyes, the way Emma, my older sister, received love like it was a currency they printed just for her, and the way I was given scraps, not even out of cruelty, out of pure indifference. And that's worse. Indifference is louder than hate. Hate at least means they noticed. But me? I was invisible. The child they didn't want. Emma was 3 years older than me, and by the time I was born, she had already wrapped them around her finger. Blonde curls, bright laugh, natural charisma. She was the child they chose, the one they dreamt of. She was every framed picture on the mantle, every brag to a neighbor, every family Christmas card. When I walked into a room, my mother would mutter, "Don't get that dress dirty," before even saying hello. When Emma walked in, it was like sunlight followed her. "Look how beautiful you look, Em. You're going to be a star. You're our everything." I wasn't jealous. Not at first. I was just confused. Why did I feel like a guest in my own house? Why did I have to earn every ounce of kindness? I remember one birthday, my 8th. I had spent all week talking about it. I made little invitations on construction paper, handed them out at school, told my teacher, my friends, even the bus driver. But when the day came, there were no balloons, no cake, no wrapped presents waiting at the table. Nothing. Just my father watching a game in the living room. My mother scrubbing the sink like it was just another Tuesday. I stood there in the kitchen, wearing the purple dress I'd laid out myself, holding a crayon-colored sign that said, "Welcome to my birthday party." Emma was upstairs planning her performance for the school talent show. I waited and waited. And when the clock hit 7 p.m., I took a single cupcake from the fridge, left over from someone else's event. I put a candle in it myself, lit it, sang softly, and blew it out. Alone. That night, I wrote in my diary, "Today I turned 8. No one noticed. Maybe next year they will. But next year, they didn't. And neither did the year after that." As the years went on, Emma grew into the family's star athlete. She played volleyball, then soccer, then track. Every weekend there was a game. Every dinner conversation was about her stats, her coaches, her scholarship hopes. When I brought home a perfect math score, my mother skimmed over it. "Just numbers," she said. When Emma got a B on a science quiz, they cheered. "Science is hard, honey. We're proud of you." It was like living in a 2-story billboard. Emma's face was front and center. I was the support beam no one saw. By the time I reached middle school, I stopped showing them my report cards. Stopped trying to sit at the table and be heard, because every time I opened my mouth, someone else talked over me. Usually Emma, sometimes my dad. Once, even the family dog barked and got more attention than I did. I started reading, disappearing into books, spending weekends at the public library while Emma was at dirt. The librarian, Miss Fran, was the first adult who ever really looked at me. "You read faster than most college kids," she said once. "You're special, Olivia." I remember freezing when she said it. Not because it was kind, but because I'd never heard it before. Special. That word felt like a warm coat on a frozen child. I began writing stories, poems, little tales about forgotten girls who became queens, girls who were overlooked until they saved entire kingdoms. I didn't know it then, but I was writing myself into the world, line by line, page by page. I was building a version of me that could survive. In high school, things got worse. Emma became the girl. Prom queen, student body vice president, dating the quarterback. Every hallway was her runway. I was 2 years behind her, still invisible. One time, a teacher accidentally called me Emma's sister. Didn't even know my name. Just her sister. At home, it was no better. They framed every one of Emma's trophies on a special shelf. I got a perfect SAT score. My dad glanced at it and said, "That's nice, Liv." Nice. As if I'd brought home a decent casserole. Not the highest score in the school. Bye. Junior year, I was holding down a part-time job and applying for colleges by myself. I did FAFSA alone, wrote my own essays, edited them 10 times until they shined. Emma had tutors, paid counselors, mock interviews with family friends. I had a mirror and a lot of hope. When I got accepted to the state's top public university with a full scholarship, I told my mom. She didn't look up from her gardening gloves. "Good for you," she said. Then Emma got into Briarcliff. They have an equestrian team. Can you believe it? Yes. Yes, I could. Because it had always been about Emma. Always. The day I left for college, no one helped me pack. Emma was on vacation. My parents had errands. So I stuffed my suitcase, loaded a duffel, called a cab, and stood on the sidewalk waiting with 2 bags and a bus ticket. My mom finally poked her head out. "You'll call us when you get there, right?" I looked at her. "Sure," I said. But I didn't. Not that day. Not for a long, long time. Because that was the day something in me clicked. The moment I stopped begging for scraps and started building a feast of my own. That day, I made myself a promise. They might never see me, but one day they won't be able to look away. I didn't speak to my family for 6 years. Not out of rage, but because the silence finally felt safe. In college, I worked like someone was chasing me. Took every extra credit opportunity, volunteered for debates, edited legal journals, even worked night shifts at coffee shop just to afford books the scholarship didn't cover. Every time I passed a mirror, I whispered, "You're building something they'll never see coming." By my second year, professors started to notice me, not just as a hardworking student, but as a mind. Sharp, focused, fierce. One of them, Professor Langston, pulled me aside after a mock trial. "You don't argue like a student," he said. "You argue like someone who's been preparing her whole life." I smiled. I had, and no one knew it. By 23, I passed the bar. I stood in the hallway outside the exam room, staring at the results on my phone, and I didn't cry. I just exhaled. Not joy. Relief. Because this wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about finally feeling free. I got a small position in a firm downtown, nothing flashy, just a clean office and decent pay. But I learned fast. Took every unwanted case. Defendant tenants who were being thrown out. Single mothers whose checks bounced. People who reminded me of myself, overlooked, underestimated, unseen. And every night I went home to my 1-bedroom apartment with a broken heater and a bookshelf stacked high. Not glamorous, but mine. Entirely mine. Meanwhile, Emma rose. She had married young, some hedge fund manager named Clark Roth. The name alone sounded rich. She posted photos of cocktail parties, designer gowns, international getaways, and eventually news outlets began calling her the city's sweetheart. Why? Because she had launched a nonprofit. Hope in Motion. The website was stunning. Smiling children, donation buttons, videos of Emma handing out backpacks to schools in low-income areas. Every magazine covered it. Emma Roth, Compassion with Class. They called her an angel. My parents couldn't stop gushing. She's a star, my mom told our extended family at a reunion. She always was. I was there, quietly sipping water by the folding chairs. She didn't even acknowledge me, like I was a distant cousin instead of her daughter, but I smiled. Because I had stopped expecting recognition and started collecting moments. Moments like that one. Moments that someday I will lay before them like evidence. It started with a letter. One small envelope that slid under my apartment door on a rainy Tuesday. No name, no return address, just to Olivia Hale. I sat on the floor, coat still on, holding it like it was a bomb. And in some ways, it was. Inside, bank records, wire transfers, accounts registered in the Cayman Islands, a list of fake vendors tied to Hope in Motion, every transfer traced. And one name printed across the top again and again, Emma Roth. At first I couldn't breathe, not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. Some part of me had always known Emma was too polished, too perfect. But this was massive. She wasn't just tied to the fraud. She was orchestrating it, creating fake donation fronts, shifting charity funds into shell accounts. And her husband? He was the puppet, the name in front. But Emma was behind the curtain. There was a note attached, typed, anonymous. You're the only one smart enough to take her down? I stared at those words for a long time. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd spent my entire life calling me a failure. And now I was the only one who could stop their pride and joy from stealing millions. I could have burned the letter, walked away. But I didn't, because this wasn't just justice, it was fate. And I was done playing the quiet one. I spent the next 2 weeks researching quietly, carefully. I verified the accounts, cross-referenced the vendors, hacked through loopholes Emma had tried to mask. She had gotten sloppy. Maybe she believed she was untouchable, and why wouldn't she? She'd always been protected, but this time her enemy wasn't jealous. It was focused. I wasn't trying to ruin her. I was trying to reveal her to the world and to our parents, so they'd finally see not just her mask, but mine, the one I wore for years to survive. Now it was time to take it off. I built a case, piece by piece, timeline, receipts, phone records, emails, and then I waited. Because I knew it was only a matter of time before the right domino fell. And then it happened. A whistleblower came forward. A former accountant from Hope in Motion. He contacted the district attorney's office, and within days the investigation launched. Emma's name leaked first, then Clark's. And just like that, their perfect image began to crack. I didn't come forward yet. Not officially. I waited, watched, let the media swirl, let my parents scramble to defend her. She would never, my father told a local reporter. She's the most honest person we know. Oh, how those words would age poorly. I kept the evidence in a locked case. Until one day, I got a subpoena. They found my fingerprints on the anonymous documents. and the DA requested a statement. When I walked into that office, I didn't flinch. I laid out every piece with clarity, with calm, and with a line at the end of my statement that the assistant DA later told me gave him chills. They spent my whole life not hearing me. Now they'll have to listen. I was added to the witness list, primary, and the trial was set. I think this whole crash. People versus Emma Roth. Federal charges. Multiple counts. Millions in fraud. It made headlines everywhere. And suddenly, I was not the forgotten daughter. I was the key witness, the woman who brought it all down. But I wasn't done, because I knew the courtroom wasn't just about legal justice. It was about emotional reckoning. For once, I would stand in front of the very people who ignored me, my family, the media, the world, and speak without stuttering. Not as Emma's sister, but as Olivia Hale, the woman they didn't want, the woman they couldn't ignore. The courthouse looked like something out of a movie. Marble columns, flashing cameras, reporters swarming the entrance like bees to honey. But this wasn't fiction. It was Emma's trial. And I wasn't the supporting character anymore. I was the one holding the match. I arrived early, dressed in a black suit, no makeup, hair pulled back. I wanted no distractions, no frills, only truth. And when truth walks into a courtroom, it doesn't need glitter. It commands attention, even if no one sees it coming. I sat in the second row, not front. I didn't want to sit with my parents, didn't want their whispers or their fake concern. They hadn't spoken to me since the witness list was released. Not a text, not a call. I didn't expect one. What would they say? Sorry we doubted you? Sorry we raised a criminal while ignoring a lawyer? No, they'd never say it. Their silence was the only honesty they'd ever given me, and I accepted that because I didn't need their apology. I just needed them to watch. The courtroom filled. Camera crews were banned, but the press overflowed. Emma entered wearing white. Of course she did. Always the image of innocence. She clutched Clark's hand, chin high, smile rehearsed. Her lawyer whispered in her ear. She didn't look my way. She didn't even acknowledge my presence until my name was called. Miss Olivia Hale, please take the stand. That's when her neck jerked. Her head snapped in my direction, and her eyes widened because she hadn't known I would be there. Hadn't expected me to be the one delivering the blow. I walked calmly, each step slow, deliberate. In the room, it leaned in. Even the judge. He adjusted his glasses, studied me, then paused. Wait, he said, narrowing his eyes. Wait, I smiled. Olivia Hale, I said clearly. His eyes went wide, and then he whispered, not to me, but to himself. Wait, you're that Olivia Hale. The room fell silent. Even my mother gasped. And for the first time in my life, I felt the shift, the tilt of power, the recognition that had been denied for decades. Finally, they saw me. I took the oath, sat down, and began. I wasn't angry. I wasn't emotional. I was surgical. I laid out timelines, cross-checked accounts, named every fake vendor, referenced every shell corporation. The courtroom stared in shock as I unraveled years of fraud in clear, articulate words. And the best part? Emma's name was all over it. Signed, stamped, smeared in digital ink. She tried to hide it, but I found it. And now the world knew. Her lawyer tried to object, tried to rattle me. Miss Hale, are you sure? Objection? leading, sustained. He kept trying, but I didn't flinch. I had faced scarier things than lawyers. I had faced a childhood without love. That builds armor. He threw inconsistencies at me. I parried them all. He questioned my motives. I said, I didn't do this to hurt Emma. I did this to stop a crime. He asked why I waited. I said, because I wanted to be certain, and because I knew no one would believe the invisible daughter until she brought receipts. The jury nodded. The judge didn't blink. And Emma? She started to shake. I stepped down. My mother was crying. My father's face was stone. They didn't dare meet my eyes. Emma grabbed my wrist as I walked past. Her nails dug into my skin. You ruined everything, she hissed. I leaned in. Spoke so softly only she could hear. No, you did. I just turned on the lights. She let go because she had nothing left to say. Because she finally knew I wasn't the quiet little shadow anymore. I was the one holding the truth. And truth, when spoken by someone invisible, roars louder than lies ever could. The prosecution rested. Emma's defense collapsed. Clark tried to pin everything on her, said she manipulated him, said he just signed what she gave him. The jury didn't buy it. They saw through the suit, through the white dress, through the fake tears. They saw what I had seen for years, the performance, and they were done applauding. It took 3 days for the verdict. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom didn't cheer, but it didn't have to, because justice doesn't always arrive in parades. Sometimes it comes in quiet gasps, in stunned faces, in the silence that follows a fall. Clark was sentenced to 12 years. Emma got 7. Fraud. Money laundering. Conspiracy. They were escorted out in cuffs. Emma didn't look back. My parents sat frozen. The cameras snapped photos of them, shocked, pale, and small. No one asked for their thoughts. No one cared what they had to say. The microphones turned to me. Olivia Hale, how did it feel? I gave them one sentence. My name is Olivia Hale. I was the child they didn't want, but I became the woman they couldn't silence. And then I walked out, head high, power in my stride. I didn't look back either, because that chapter was closed. It's strange how quiet the world becomes when you win. Not the kind of win with fireworks or champagne. The kind that settles deep in your bones like a storm that's finally passed. The kind where you sit alone in your apartment, still wearing the same black suit from court, and just breathe. For the first time in your life, fully. That night, I didn't go out. Didn't take interviews. Didn't post a single thing on social media. I turned off my phone, curled up in my reading chair, and stared out the window. The sky was a velvet blue, a slow wind brushing against the trees. The world didn't stop. It just shifted, like a long tilted scale finally finding balance. And I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I was free. Truly, quietly, and fully free. The next morning, I opened my email. Over 200 unread messages from news outlets, law firms, universities, nonprofits. A few even offered book deals. They wanted the story. They wanted the sister who exposed the lie. I ignored most of them, except one, from a girl named Maya, a 16-year-old foster kid who said she saw my story online. Her message read, No one in my life has ever believed in me. They call me nothing. I just wanted you to know. Today, I believe in me because I saw what you did. And maybe I can do something one day too. I read it twice, then a third time, and I cried. For Maya. For me. For every girl who was ever called nothing. Because the truth was, this was never just about Emma, or even my parents. It was about every moment I thought I was alone, and finally realizing I wasn't. 3 days later, my parents showed up at my door. I saw them through the peephole. My mother was holding a pie, store-bought, but still an offering, a gesture. I didn't answer right away. I stood on the other side of the door, listening to them breathe, wondering what I'd say, wondering what they'd say. I opened the door. My mother's eyes welled up immediately. My father looked older than I remembered. Tired. Smaller. "Can we come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. Not because I forgave them, but because I needed closure. So did they. We sat in silence. The pie sat untouched on the table. Finally, my mother spoke. "I don't know how we got it so wrong." I looked her in the eye. "You didn't get it wrong. You just never tried to get it right." She winced. My father shifted uncomfortably. "I was angry," she said. "At everything. At the world. And when you came along, so quiet, so different, I didn't know how to love that." Tears ran down her cheeks. "I know that's not fair, but it's the truth." For a moment, I felt like the child again, begging for a crumb of warmth. But I wasn't her anymore. I was the woman who stood in court and didn't flinch. So I said what needed to be said. "You hurt me for years, and I carried that pain into every corner of my life. But I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to move on." My father cleared his throat. "You were brilliant, Olivia." Finally, my name, said with respect. And not just because I had power now, but because they saw me, fully, painfully, clearly. They stayed for 20 minutes. We didn't hug, but we shook hands. That was enough. Not a beginning, but not a war anymore either. Just peace. Quiet, delicate, earned peace. In the months that followed, my life transformed. Not overnight, but steadily. I started my own practice, focused on advocacy law, took in cases involving girls like Maya and women like me, people who were written off, who had to build from scratch. I named it Shadow and Light Legal, because that's what we all are. A little shadow, a little light, trying to balance both. The judge from Emma's case wrote me a letter, said he'd never forget that day, said he tells law students about me now. "Don't underestimate the quiet ones," he wrote. "They're the ones who change the game." 1 year later, I was invited to speak at a leadership summit. I almost declined. Public speaking still made my stomach knot. But I went, not for me, but for Maya. And every person who needed to hear this story. The auditorium was packed. Hundreds of faces. Bright lights. Sweaty palms. I stepped to the podium, took a deep breath, and began. "Good evening. My name is Olivia Hale. Some of you might know me as the sister who testified or the woman who broke the silence. But that's not who I've always been. I was the girl no one listened to, the one who sat at the dinner table and felt invisible. I was the forgotten child, the afterthought, the shadow. And for years, I thought maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't enough. But I was. I always was. I just had to believe it before anyone else did. So I want to say this, especially to the young women here tonight. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to be seen to matter. And even if they ignore you, especially if they ignore you, build anyway. Build your mind. Build your future. Build your fire. Because when the time comes, you won't need to scream. You'll just have to speak. And the room will stop. They will listen. Wait, you're her? I paused, smiled, and finished. Yes, yes, I am. And I always was. The applause shook the walls. But I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because I was whole. And when you're whole, you don't fall apart. You rise. Epilogue years from now, when people ask how it happened, how Olivia Hale went from the invisible girl to the voice of truth, I'll tell them it wasn't revenge. It was reckoning. Not destruction, but unveiling. And I'll leave them with a question, the one that still echoes in my bones. That I ask you now, have you ever been the forgotten one? And if so, what will you do when they finally see you?